Hey there everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we'll be doing another one of those. And in today's video, we'll be going over, armor profiles, so like, kind of armor profiles, like, asking about that, like how, and some tanks, some things about like ammo type of stuff, like, why, like, some things balance and, stuff like that, and, just overall some stuff like that, like, armor, penetration, types of stuff. So let's just get straight. So starting off, have just armor profiles. Okay, so armor profiles, you really need to kind of memorize them. And for newer players, it's really a struggle to memorize different, because I remember going through this. Basically each tier you go up, you'll be running into a bunch of new tanks that you've never met, and then you'll be really confused. Some tanks you might not even know. That's even when there's new. For example, right when the Cran Wagon released, oh god, that was, I just couldn't pen anything. Everyone just out, but, so yeah, basically you have to just kind of memorize the things. There's a few ways that you can kind of help, kind of some lines and stuff, so they're kind of easy to, kind of, or a lot of things are kind of similar on, like, certain tech trees. For example, okay, so American heavies. Now this is not all of them, obviously, but this is a lot of them. Most American heavies. That's like, so the T1 heavy, the M6, basically everything in the E5 line. You have like the T34, most American heavies. Pretty sure all right. There's M6. Basically all American heavies have strong turrets. They have strong turrets. Like the T29's got a strong turret. They have strong turrets. They have pretty strong frontal armor overall. Not really the best hull armor sometimes, but still overall basically pretty strong turret. They don't really have not necessarily the best side armor, really, like, nothing compared to, like, the Russians and stuff, but, they got good turret armor, and also they tend to have good gun depression. And for those of you that don't know what depression is, that, gun depression is basically how far you can get your gun aimed downward. So it may not sound, like, important at all, and then, that was me too. I used to think that gun depression was, like, the least important thing, but it's one of the most important things, because you can have the strongest turret possible, but if you have no gun depression, you can't use it in a ridgeline effectively. You can't really hold down with it. You can't really do much at all, and you really need gun depression. It's so important to use ridgelines. You can, like, hold down on different spots, and gun depressions are. So basically, the most American tanks, basically, all of them pretty much have gun depression. Pretty good amount of gun depression. If you just scroll through some tier 10s, okay, E4 and the TDs are kind of an exception, but if we go to E5, got 8 degrees, M48 with a 90. Just scroll through, you can see all these good gun depressions. So they all have pretty good gun depression. They're good. The heavies and stuff, and a lot of the mediums also. Like Pershing, Super Pershing. They tend to have like strong turrets. German tanks tend to have more like on the heavies on like the Tiger, going up to like the 5 area. They tend to have good full armor, decent turret armor, but not the best turret armor. And also one thing that the German tanks tend to have a lot is weak lower plates. So like the mouse line, they all have weak lower plates here. The upper plates are strong and the lower plates are weak. And like on the E100, the mouse, pretty much any super heavy type of tank have weak lower plates. That's just how they work. Because if they put strong upper plate armor, they'll be too heavy if they put the same thickness of lower plate armor. So, they're just usually, basically all German heavies pretty much tend to have, like, for example, the VK36 also, they tend to have weak lower plates. So if you want to pen a tank like this, you would most of the time be trying to pen the lower plate, because those are the weakest parts of German heavies. In German super heavies in like the tier 10s and like the upper tiers, it's the turret cheeks are also very weak. Just spam some heat shells through there and then you'll easily pen. Like the mouse, the E100, the YAG fans or E100, things like that. So of course, basically not really, the premium tanks are exceptions. There's always some exception tanks. There's always some different tanks, but these are just most tanks, that you'll run into. So for the Russian line, there's the IS heavy. The IS heavies, there's a lot of them. Not only in just the IS-7 line. A few of them in like that, for example, the IS-4 is kind of like an IS heavy. You have like premiums, like the Object 252, the IS-5, the IS-6, the Glacial, the Celestial. A lot of those tanks are kind of like IS heavy. So what exactly are like IS heavies? Well, some of them have pike nose, some don't, but it's not really that. It's basically they're all pretty similar though. They all carry basically all of them carry like a 120 gun. Most of them do, not all of them, obviously. Basically a lot of them. The KV-1S has the top gun as a 122. Same as the IS, the IS-3, IS-8 has another one, but excluding that, most IS heavies, like especially in the tier 8 area, tend to have 1 guns, which deal 400 average damage. They don't really have the best accuracy. They're just kind of basically the simple Russian guns. Their armor profiles, the side armors are all very, very troll. On all the IS heavies, they have very strong side armor, especially when you get to like the tier 8 ones. You run into like the IS-5, the IS-6, 252, the Celestial, the Glacial. They've got good side armors. They have good side armors, and the IS-3, stuff like that. Yeah, they have really strong troll side armor. They're just really troll. They're angled weirdly, and they're just troll. So the side armors are pretty strong on these tanks. The frontal armor is not too bad, but it's not like the best. The IS-3 is good. Doesn't have good roll. There's tanks like the 252 that have good upper plate armor, but really weak lower plates. And then there's the turrets, which are all very, very strong on the run. They're really like sloped and low, so they're really hard to pen, and they're strong also. And tanks like that, pike nose tanks. There's the pike nose IS heavies, which are basically they have a really weak lower plate. The lower plate is extremely weak and pretty large. The 252 is one of the biggest ones, probably the biggest. There's some smaller lower plates like the IS-3, the IS-5, but they tend to have some pretty big lower plates that are really easy to really. Then they have pretty strong frontal armor, or not frontal, can't talk. Upper plate armor that's angled, and it's pre-angled. So basically, you'll have German tanks like a Tiger II, for example. It's flat, right? It's flat. If you look this way, it's well, not flat like slope-wise, but it's not angled. So if you look straight like this, it's just like basically straight. So you have to angle it yourself. You have to angle it yourself in order to maximize the armorness, because you know, like if you angle something, you get like thicker effective armor. On pike nose tanks, it's already pre-angled. The upper plates are pre-angled already, which means that you don't have to angle. So it may sound cool because that means you don't even have to angle. Well, the issue is you have a lower plate that's flat. The lower plate is really weak. So the tanks like these are really easy to take out. Actually, they may seem really troll, and they are very troll. Like a 252, for example. So many people say it's like broken and you can't pen at all. Well, that's not really true, unless if they're hiding their lower plate, then it's pretty true. But the lower plate is an easy way to go through. You can also go through the side, like through the track wheel area. On these tanks, you can go through the side. The side armor is extremely troll on these tanks, especially the Object 252. It's got like black holes, but it's not impenetrable. First of all, you can splash HE, you can go right there, deal like at least 100 damage, but also there's some weak spots you can like slip a shell right through there and then do some damage. There's places that for example, the IS-4. Let me pull out my IS-4. There's a weak spot on. Can't show it on Armor Inspector because I don't pay for them. I can't upper tier tanks, but there's like an area like around here that basically it's like a super weak area that you could go right through. So basically the Russian IS heavies are not hard to take out if you know what you're doing, especially because these tanks also don't have gun depression. So most American tanks have strong turrets gun depression, right? The Russian tanks are the worst at gun depression. They don't have gun depression. Basically can't find any tank, Russian tank with a lot of gun depression. Or there's a few, of course, but not really too many. Especially when you get up to the upper tiers. The 140's got 6 degrees, 62 at 7, IS-7, IS-4 with 6. Most of the IS heavies are around 6 to 5 degrees. They don't have much gun depression, even though they have strong turrets. So get them in some gun depression position ridge line, and even though their turret is strong, they can't really get their gun down enough to shoot you back. They have long reloads, basically, especially with those 122mm in tier 8. They've got like around 12-ish, 13-second reloads. They're really easy to take out while they're on reload, especially when you got DPM, if you're in like a tank with DPM. So those are the Russian tanks. British tanks, well, there's the only one heavy line, which is the 215 line. They're kind of with the lower tier ones and stuff, they're basically kind of like super strong frontal armor, pretty strong side armor type of things. They're really slow, basically, pretty much, especially on the lower tier ones stuff, and then they have really high DPM guns. Basically, all of these Even at the 215B, it's a pretty high DPM gun, but especially the lower tier ones have really high DPM guns, like the Black Prince, for example. It does only 160 off. They have really low average damage, but they have a crazy rate of fire, which means that you want to deal with these tanks by like in a distance by trading shots with them. That way, every 160 damage they do, you're able to slap a 400 damage or whatever shell into them, and then you just back up behind cover, and they're useless. They're reloaded, but they can't even do anything. So they're pretty easy to take care of. Of course, if they rush you and they're like you're in a rebelling situation, they've got the DPM. They're able to they kind of have an advantage on. But the Black Prince, for example, they kind of lack on penetration, so not like too much to worry about. Japanese doesn't have heavies. Okay, Chinese are basically Russians, so we'll just call these IS heavies. They're basically IS heavies. They're slightly different, but pretty similar to IS heavies. We have the French heavies, which are completely different, and I wouldn't really call them heavies. Lower tier ones are kind of heavies, like the RL-44, stuff like that, but AMX M4 doesn't have, like, the best armor, and 5100 has absolutely no armor. It's more of a medium. 5120 it doesn't really have armor either, and same 50B doesn't really have armor, and they all have mobility. They're clippers. They have crazy. Well, after the 50 clippers, they have auto loaders, able to deal mass amounts of damage. And then they have like a big long 20-second reel. They have mobility though. They have no armor. They can't side scrape. They can't hold down. They're pretty easy to take out. They just have mobility. So, those are the French ones, and then the European heavies. The Swedish heavies. Starting at the ML1. These tanks have extremely strong turrets, especially like in the Kranwagen. Really strong turrets, especially since they're sloped. If they're in a gun depressing position, which they have good gun depression, 9 degrees on the Kranwagen, 10 degrees on the they're just impossible. Roof, the cupolas on the top, but those are pretty hard to pen if they're in a gun depression position. They have decent upper plate armor, weak lower plates, and weak side armor. Basically, no side armor. They're HE at both sides, especially like the one. So those are basically all the overall armor profiles. Most of them are similar to that, and then especially the ones to pay attention to are the American ones, the strong turrets. They all have strong turrets. Pretty much. There might be a few exceptions. I don't know, out of the top of my head, but basically all American heavies. Just think of it as American heavies should have strong turrets. You really, now they have cupolas sometimes stuff, but like that, like the T-34 for example. Some people say it's impenetrable in a hold down position, but you can just pen through it. You go through them. And then also some tanks, for example, the if you're wondering about like, let's say you're in like a thing where this 252 is like in a hold down. If you're there's actually what you can still like HE splash the sides. You can HE splash the top also. The roofs pretty much all tanks are pretty weak. Tops of tanks are weak. Roofs, for example, the IS-6 is like a really weak. But, basically, the I-6 you could, like, a little overmatch it with some high pension. Anyways, you can just splash some HE right at the top of the roof, and I'll do a decent amount of damage. Do, like, 100 plus damage. Actually, not. It's a pretty efficient way to deal damage, especially if the other opponent doesn't know what to do. Like, if they don't do HE to you, then you're able to actually rack up a pretty good amount of damage. So yeah, things to remember are the American tanks, the German tanks. They pretty much all have pretty weak lower plates. Tanks like the Tiger II, for example, if you want to know how to pen this, either go for the turret or the cupola on the top, or just load premium. That's the simplest way to go through a Tiger, is just load premium, and the Tiger is butter. Unless if you're like a low pen, like a 7 or something, then you gotta work on either flanking the tank to the side, or going through the turret if you can. Tanks like the Tiger I or the VK-36 just go through the lower plate. It's simple as that. Lower plate. You can also go through turret on the Tiger since it's not that strong. Or I mean the Tiger I. But lower plate is just simple. E75, really simple to pen. Just go through the lower plate. This one is really weak. The Tiger II, might be a little misleading because the lower plate is not that weak actually. Pretty strong still. So just load premium to go through if you can't pen. But E75, it's super butter on the lower plate. Just go right through the lower plate. It's simple as that. And E100 and mouse, similar type of thing. Just go through the lower plate. Or you could go through the, cheeks, turret cheeks, also. So, yeah, pretty simple going through. They're basically all pretty similar. The Russian tanks are also pretty similar. Like, all the IS heavies are basically strong side armors. You gotta, jump on. Well, I'll just finish up this video because it won't be too much. Well, basically those are the armor profiles. Now I want to go through a few more other things. Messages. So, ammo type. So you might be wondering why let's say you bounced, you're in like a T-49, for example, and you bounced your, heat shell just right off the side of, like, some tank, like say, like an IS-3, just right off the side. You should easily be able to penetrate, right? You have plenty of penetration to go through. Or let's say you're in, like, let's just say that you're in, like, some kind of tank that, shoot, the WZ Celeste, or like an, and then you see a T-26E4 super perfect, and he's facing forward. You can't pen him with standard ammo. Can't pen him. He's got too much armor. So you're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna load premium. I'm gonna load heat, and I'm gonna shoot. And then it just goes right through and just randomly disappears. What? How? Okay, so first of all, there's so APCR, heat, AP. They're a little more than just types that have different penetration values, because they have different they work in different. So let's start off with the simple AP, armor piercing. So armor piercing is the standard shell that you'll get on pretty much any tank. Any low tier tank pretty much just fires AP. A lot of tanks fire AP. Even tier 10s fire standard AP on like the object one. Some TDs they fire standard AP. AP is one of the most favorite shells just because it's it works and does not have the best penetration, obviously, because it's the standard shell, but they don't ricochet too much. They have like a decent shell velocity still, and they're they go through spaced armor. They don't get absorbed in spaced armor, and they go through pretty much most types of stuff. They go through, like, if you have spaced armor, they'll go through. If you have like whatever, just AP is a standard shell that will go through. APCR, okay, this is, sometimes they're premium shells on certain tanks that, basically the tanks that fire AP, you'll have heat or APCR as, but sometimes APCR is also a standard ammo type in a lot of tier 10 meds, like a 62A, a Leo 1, you'll have APCR as your standard. So what is APCR do? Well, APCR, is basically has a higher shell velocity. It ricochets, though, at, like, more, easier to, like, basically bounce. So, like, for example, you're at an angle and then it fires. I'm not sure my mouse cursor, but then if it's at an angle, then it'll just like it'll have like it'll go through some calculation, then it'll ricochet, meaning bounce it off. So when they say like bounced off, it's usually like a ricochet type of thing. But ricochets are different to non-penetration. And so ricochets are basically like when they just like bounce off, and then those are just on AP and AP stars. It says, okay, so this is one thing I wondered back then. When I was like kind of bad at the game still and new to the game. I say, I was wondering. So if you read heat description, it says high explosive anti-tank shells have high penetration, and penetration pairs do not depend on fire rate. Penetration significantly decrease. Yeah, never ricochet. See that? And then for heat, or not heat, high explosive, never ricochet. So I'm like, so I was like, but then sometimes your heat shells just won't go. Like, wait, what? I thought that they never ricochet. So I legit thought back then that heat shells never bounce. They never non-penetrate. They basically, in other words, they 100% penetrate every single time. Well, ricocheting is different. Ricocheting is when they just bounce off. Non-penetrating, heat, don't penetrate. The APCRs ricochet a lot. They also lose a lot of penetration over distance. It's an issue. See? If you read this, most effective when dealing damage to armor tanks, can ricochet. Or it doesn't say have high penetration. Okay, it doesn't say here, but they lose penetration over distance. They lose the most penetration over distance, which is a huge issue, because that means that over the distance, you'll like the farther away the enemy target is, you'll do less damage. That can be a pretty big issue. So you might be wondering why. Well, APCR is basically the only it damages stuff on impact. It just goes fast. That's why it has the highest shell velocity. It has a really high shell velocity. It's really fast. And, so it just literally, it penetrates just with speed itself. Speed itself just penetrates through armor. But if you're going for a long distance, that speed will decrease, right? Just like a plane. So that's, yeah, that's APCR. Now, heat shells. Heat shells are, a little, like, kind of different shells. They don't ricochet, but that does not mean that they penetrate 100% of the time, because they don't. heat shells are like some special chemical reaction thing that happens, and okay, first of all, they do not penetration doesn't increase when they over distance. So if you shoot for like 400 meters versus 100 meters, there's no penetration difference. But there is a huge thing with heat shells, which is one thing that I really hate about shells, and a lot of people really hate about. Think of heat as like a high explosive shell. High explosive shells can't go through fences, for example. There's like you know, a lot of maps, like city maps, have like a right. They won't go through them. You know what? I'm just gonna training room and pick a map. But anyways, I'll start talking about some of the stuff still. So let's pick a map like I don't know. Okay, so heat shells they have some chemical reaction thing, but they get absorbed in spaced armor. So any spaced armor tank. So that's like any IS heavies have spaced armor on the side. There's like a lot of spaced armor tanks that have spaced armor. They get absorbed in space. They get absorbed in tracks, guns, stuff like that, module or different things like that. They get absorbed in there, which means it like decreases the penetration by a crazy amount, and usually means that they don't pen. So you'll probably be wondering a lot of times, like, why does a heat shell just randomly disappear inside like the side of an IS-3? It's not your RNG being just your ammo. Not be using heat. Heat should only be used on like tanks that for example, like a mouse on the upper plate or a mouse on the turret cheeks. Yes, obviously. Alright, for example here, let's just pretend that there's an enemy like behind this fence, right? So how am I gonna kill the enemy? Well, if I load HE or heat, it knocks down the fence, and look where the explosion went. It just exploded on the fence, which means that the dude right behind the fence will be totally safe. You wouldn't, the shell would just literally blow up on the fence, and then nothing else would happen. But if you fire an APCR or an AP kind of thing, they'll penetrate through the fence. And you see that? Did you see the dirt like blow up there? It goes through the fence and it keeps flying, which means that there's a tank behind the fence. They'll get hit. Now like AP and AP shell, APCR shells still lose penetration, like things like objects. If you're hiding behind some things, then they'll hit those things, and then they'll lose like penetration over it. But still, you'll have a pretty good chance of going. Whereas if you fire, so you might be wondering, for example, some dude like hiding behind a tree or something, and you're gonna like, let's say there's like this is one thing that people complain about so much. You see like a grill or like a RHM or like a WT hiding behind like a tree or something, or like a fence. And then you're gonna be like, haha, I'm gonna give you some HE. You fire it, and then it'll just hit the fence, and it'll just blow up on the fence, and then you'll do 0 damage. That happens so many times. You need to pay attention to that, because you need to fire the AP. Because heat and HE just doesn't go. So heat and HE also HE goes through spaced armor, but it just loses a lot of damage. So instead of doing like the damage that you'll want, it'll only do. So yeah, you really need to pay attention to that because the spaced armor is a big thing that a lot of people like. People spamming heat into the side of an IS-4 is not going to do anything because you got like spaced armor stuff, or like an IS-7 252 that. So yeah, those are for heat and HE. So basically also heat doesn't have let me see. So yeah, if you wanna if you have like a sharper angle, you don't really want to fire APCR, because APCR ricochets easier. So if you're like, if you have a or let's not choose a mouse, let's choose like let's just say a Tiger one. Alright, at like a some kind of angle like this, well, maybe, I don't know, some angle like this. If you have a high pen gun, let's say this is like a tier 8, some kind of like, I don't know, some high pen gun, an AP shell should probably go through there. APCR would well, I guess the APCR would also go through. Let's not use a Tiger one. I don't know, but anyways, that's basically the thing. Also, auto ricochet. Auto ricochets is when it so let me see. So when you have like a an angle, so I forget. I need to actually look up the. I'm not exactly sure. I don't want to give a wrong answer to everyone, but is it like 30 degrees or something? I'm not pretty sure. But on a certain angle, basically, no matter how like thick the armor is or anything like that, you're gonna bounce. Which means even like a Sheridan or a Leopard 1, some no armor tank, still gonna bounce just because the angle is so sharp. Unless if it overmatches the armor, meaning the shell caliber. So like, take a look. Caliber 105 millimeters is 3 times, I think, 3 times more than just the armor thickness itself. 105 millimeters, then it'll match. So you have like, so 105, just 5 3. I can't do my maths right now, but let's say you have like a, or let's just say you have like a 10 millimeter armor, then 3 times that by 3, that's obviously any. I can't think right now, my maths. Whatever. Okay, so anyways, I basically went over like the armors. Armor profiles is probably important for a lot of people, so you basically need to memorize. So back to the first video about don't rush through tiers. It's really important to play your tier and master your tier because you need to learn all of the armor profiles in that tier and the tier after it. For example, we'll start off with tier 6. You need to learn all the tier 6 armor profiles, all the tier 7 armor profiles. Once you've mastered all of that, you have a pretty decent stats in them. Then you're ready to move on to tier 7. You gotta master all of the tier 8s. And tier 8s are really hard because there's so many tanks. So many premium tanks, so many tanks out there that it's gonna take a while to master tier 8. But after that, tier 9 is not too hard. Tier 10 is a little tricky, but not too hard either. And overall, they're not too, it's not too hard to remember. Once you just start playing the tier more, then it'll start being a lot easier. You'll start like remembering everything. Once you know all the armor profiles, it's pretty good. Once you know like all the weak spots, because there's some tanks that are different. For example, like a VK-72, you'll like, oh, this area right here is. Then you'll be like, so some tanks you just need to memorize some stuff. Like, it just takes some time, but well, it's not. You actually play the game. But that'd be it for today's. So hopefully you learned something. Enjoyed the video. If you want any other videos made, comment down below, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.